We'd like to welcome you to this memorial service for our friend Dirk. And we'd just like to say thank you for coming from wherever. Some have come quite a long ways to be here. You'll notice that my throat is a little bit raw this morning. That's because we had a late night football game. And my allergies are going nuts. So again, we would like to welcome you. Leslie, I'm going to need a little help. I'm going to have to re-up your phone for the obituary. It's showing a picture of me or you and Dirk here, or Molly and Dirk. So if you could just, I don't know anything about electronics, folks. If you're a member of our church, you'll know that. Thank you. Oh, we did it again. Hello, come back. I'm going to make you read it if it's not right. Bring up the obituary on the phone. The one you said you wouldn't read because you're a chicken? That one. Is that it? Dirk Frederick Bashir passed from this life on Tuesday, September the 12th, 2023 at age 80. Dirk was born August the 27th in 1943 in San Jose, California, to Herman Boucher and Martha Bashir. Martha passed away early in his life, and Dirk was blessed to be raised by his loving mom, Patricia Bashir. Dirk married his beloved high school sweetheart, Nola Hutchins, and she was a looker. I saw some pictures. Nola Hutchins in 1964. They were together until she passed away in 2020. Dirk began farming when he was just 20 years old. He later went into business with his partner and close friend, Eddie Tognetti. Together they owned and operated B&T, oh boy, B&T something. I got it. Dirk's life was completely dedicated to his love of his Lord and Savior and his passion for farming and good cutting horses. He was a member of the National Cutting Horse Association, the Pacific Coast Cutting Horse Association, the Farm Bureau, and was a member of the church in Peaster. Dirk will be remembered as a man with a high moral compass, determination, and a relentless work ethic. Who was honest, generous, and believed in the good of others. Dirk is preceded in his death by his wife, Nola Bashir, parents Herman and Patricia Bashir, and by his siblings, Robert Bashir and Linda Bashir. Dirk is survived by his daughter, Leslie Miseru of Weatherford, Texas, granddaughter, Molly Miseru, sister, Barbara Sawyer, and many nieces and nephews. Again, on behalf of the family, I'd like to welcome you. My name is John Anderson. I'm the senior pastor here. And Leslie, are you ready to come up and say something? You can do it. And it's Mirasu, isn't it? Yeah. I knew that. Okay. I knew you didn't. Is it on? Yeah.
I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I want you to know that I know he's in heaven, and I know I should be celebrating, and in my heart I am, because he hasn't been himself probably for the last 5 years, and we've been struggling with that and that reality of that for a while. But I want to thank you all for being here. If I cry, it's going to be because I'm overwhelmed with the love and support that we've had. And I'm really touched by all of you. And I know there's a bunch of people that couldn't come today that are either, in California or stock showing or have other things come up or sick. But again, Molly and I are so touched by the outreach and the love that we've got from all y'all. And so I want to say thank you more than anything. So if I cry, it's because of you. I wanted to tell you a little bit more about my dad, because I feel like, you guys got to meet a different man. And I'm not saying that he got saved that late in life. He got saved out in California, and yes, he made a lot of changes out there. But the man that he was, he got out here and he quit. I mean, he just wanted to sit in his chair and watch TV and read. The man I grew up with got up at 4:30 in the morning. You know, would come up to me and say, "You can sleep all day. Get the lead out of your butt. Let's go. You're slow. Come on." You know, he'd laugh at me and roast me about things like that constantly. He always pushed me to be better. Somebody else was asking if he had much of a temper. And I didn't even think about this before, but he didn't have much of a temper. But if he blew up, it was really ugly and scary. I mean, and thank God it never was like that with me, because he always left me with that feeling that I wanted to make him proud or I didn't want to disappoint him. I can only think of one time in my life that he actually grabbed me by the arm, and I probably shouldn't tell this, but just to put it in perspective, you know, I mean, yeah, we had tough times, and Mom was an alcoholic, and it was one of those drunken brawls, and she and I were getting after it, okay? And he broke it up. But that was the extent of really any strict discipline he put on me. If I wanted to go out 2 nights on a weekend, it would be like, I don't see the necessity of it. He was just very practical, down to earth. He was so solid in all of his wisdom and guidance in my lifetime. Again, if there's anything I wanted to do, especially with the horses, I found out real quick when I got to driving and everything was cool if I was going to school or going somewhere with my horse. But if I pulled up to get more fuel, he'd be like, "Where you been? How come you're going through so much fuel?" And I went, "Well, I went over here and I helped work cattle over there, and I went over there and took lessons, and I went over here and I went to school, and there's 3/4 of a tank." And he'd be like, "Okay." And he'd be like, "Get out of here," you know. Anyway, I'll try to make this quick because, again, my goal was to paint a picture of the man that he was. He started farming when he was 20. He probably started a little bit before that on his grandmother's place on a little plot that is now downtown San Jose. It would be the equivalent of Medical District of Fort Worth right now. And it was a little plot, and he'd be out there with a horse and plow. And this was, you know, there were tractors around, but he did with what he had. And somebody had a horse, and there was a plow for him to use, and he did that, and he planted tomatoes, and he got Mom to sell them in a fruit stand on the street. Then my uncle, his uncle, offered him an opportunity to come to work for him in Gilroy on 250 acres. But this is all fresh vegetables, high maintenance types crops, not your cereal grains and stuff like that. This is all pretty intense stuff. You have to micromanage the water, your fertilizer, your pesticides. He used to say later when he started going to church and taking Sundays off that Mondays were bad days. And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Because the plants grew a whole day and a half without me." You know, he was so meticulous. He could drive by fields and tell you how much money he's got in those peppers over there into that plot, into that 50 acres. Drive down the road and tell you what he's got into this 100 acres of garlic, what he's got into this corn. He could tell you how much he had into it. He could tell you the weak spots that were in that field, where the water ran, where it was porous, what the ground needed. He'd even watch other people's that were farming around him, their ground and what they were doing, and he'd tell you what they're doing wrong. Again, that's a Bookser thing, okay? You're either right or you're wrong. And one joke that he and Molly had going for years was, you know, that right or wrong thing, and they were always like poking at each other about who's right and who's wrong. And Mom saw this sign in one of these little restaurants out here in town that said, "It's better to be kind than be right." And so she's sitting there all happy, like, you know, "Ha-ha, I got one on you." And Molly and Dad just are sitting together, and I've got a picture of them on my phone. It's really blurry, but they started busting up because Dad said, "Whoever said that wasn't right very often." Yes, he used to be, excuse my term, but he used to be a hard ass, and he was a stud. Grandpa didn't want him farming. He came from a family of teachers. He wanted him to go to school, get an education. Didn't want him farming. He also didn't want him to marry my mom. And Grandpa was another one of those people that you didn't like to disappoint. But Dad did. not only by becoming a farmer and also by marrying my mom. And he stood up and he asked my grandfather for permission to marry my mom. My grandfather said no. And Dad says, well, if you don't say yes, I'm going to make it so you have to. And they eloped. So I know that real stand-up man is not what we saw in his later days. He got really soft and mushy, and he got where when he came out here, he cried at the drop of a hat. That wasn't the man I grew up with. And I'm not saying that's all bad. He pushed us. There's a little bronze statue down there with a girl reaching out to a man on a cowboy on the horse. And we were in this store, and he started breaking down crying, and we're like, what? I mean, this is probably 8 years ago, maybe even 10. And we're like, what? And Mom got it right away, and she goes, that's you and Molly, isn't it? And he said, yes. And he had to have it. So we bought that for Molly. Let's see. Anyway, he turned down working at a machine shop for $125 a week to go work for my uncle for $75 a week. And I'm not kidding you, he just rat-holed every nickel and dime, and when he got a chance to farm a little piece of it, he doubled down. Every time he could get ahead, he doubled down. And I don't know if you know farmers, especially since he didn't own the property, everything was leased. The banks are more on top of you. But every time he made a little bit of money, he doubled down, and then you borrow just as much, okay? So every year, you start out the year with a little bit of money in your pocket because they start paying you for last year, and he starts spending, and then he'd always measured the year by how soon he was into the bank again. There were some real bad years. We had years where he'd have beautiful crops, everything's going right, and then it would rain in the middle of harvest. And I'm not telling you to watch the pain and the heartbreak and disappointment in him and the level of stress. It was hard. It made me love agriculture, watching the ups and downs of it. I became very passionate about agriculture. And I guess Molly and I took that more towards the animals than we did to growing things than he did. But anyway, it was a very high-risk job. He was I'm going to say this just because I need to. I'm sorry, but farmers and ranchers are the real, what do you call it? The real environmentalists. Again, because he knew how to take care of his ground. He knew how things flowed. He knew where to put roads, where not to go, and don't go out on that ground when it was wet. I mean, that was a religion. He worked such long hours on the furrows. He used to park his truck at the end of the furrows where the water's running down these gated furrows, and he got them little wind-up, loud alarm clocks put on his dash, and he set himself down by the fastest furrows. Well, he got so tired, he started sleeping through those. That bing, 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 really loud, and he'd sleep through them and wake up stuck, surrounded in water, in a mess. So what did he do? He started sleeping in the furrows. He'd point his feet towards towards the top of the furrow, and he'd lay down there. He said it'd usually wake him up by the time it hit his ankles. So, I mean, he was tough. He would also, I can remember going out to the ranch with my dad. Yes, I rode in the back of the pickup. 10-inch gated pipe. I don't know if y'all have seen it. I mean, it's like this deep, 30 feet long. My dad was such a stud. He'd lunge through those fields. You know, all the furrows are different in their lengths and widths because of the crop that he's growing. But he would do lunges and have them on both sides and do these lunges across the field and then stop and, you know, try to match it up 15 feet away with his hand. I did that with the little 3-inch pipe, sprinkler pipe. It's not easy. And anyway, yeah, he'd roast me about that kind of stuff, and he'd laugh and tell me I didn't do things right and I didn't use my head. Those were big things of his. Let's see. Farmers are also extreme pessimistic, and they're also, how would you say, indirectly optimistic. Because throughout the whole year, when they're planting, you're watching things grow, and you're asking him, how do the crops look? How do things look? How's it going? And he'd say, oh, not so good. This one's got a little phytophthora. We've got mold growing over here. We've got some weak spots over there. And he'd just start complaining about how we could use like 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch with a little bit of rain after and not too much sun, blah, blah, blah. We got too much water over here, not enough over there. It'd just be like, it was never perfect with a farmer. But they're optimistic because when it's all done, they go and do it again. They're out there planting again and ripping up that ground again, getting ready for next year. My favorite time of the year was winter with my dad's because he would slow down, and I still tend to want to hibernate when it rains because he would come in and we would hibernate, sit around and watch movies. Of course, he'd want to watch football and stuff too. Those were good times. And then he'd also pick me up at school sometimes when I was in grade school to go skiing. Again, he didn't do anything halfway, not even skiing. Straight down the hill, no woe. Ski patrol was always chasing him. They had a name for him. It's not completely appropriate to say, but they called him the brown streak. You can add the rest. And they chased him and tried to catch him because people would be, see him coming down the hill, and they're like, oh my God, we got to get out of the way. They start panicking. And when I was learning how to ski, he'd chase me with the pole and say, if you don't go faster, I'm going to shove this pole up your butt. Yes. And he'd say, and then when I go worried about pulling out, whether it was in traffic of driving or pulling out to ski, getting back out, he'd say, go, get out there. It's their problem. Don't worry about them. And I'm like, but I want to get hit. Just go. And that's the way he was. He went. We're getting off and on roads all around those farm grounds, and you're doing with busy roads. He'd get off on those dirt roads like it was a freeway off-ramp. He'd hit that thing. That truck would go flying. His truck and his equipment took a beating. He traveled a circle when he and Eddie were partners. That's what B&T is. They were partners for 36 years. That was an extremely special relationship. They completely balanced each other out in almost perfection. Eddie was volatile and very exciting to be around, and they both had their gifts, and they had their territories of what they did, and the other one just said, that's yours. I'm not worried about it. And they didn't oversee each other. They didn't nitpick anything. To show the value and the trust that they had, as the years went on, Eddie got hard of hearing, and people would come around either to sell him something, equipment, or loans, and all kinds of business people in and out, in and out. And Eddie would be standing there, and he could read some lips, but then after they'd leave, he'd go, hey, partner, what'd they say? We okay? Whatever you say, partner, and they did. They just, it was really the best thing for him. And it was really cool to watch. Two real good men, that were as honest to the core and as truthful and loyal. And if there was anything that happened, everybody used to say in the community, if anything happened to either one of them, the other one was going to do more than take care of the other. Give more than their fair share to the other. Didn't have to worry about that. And I felt that way about that family too. I didn't have to worry about anything. In fact, they felt like an extension of family, even though I wasn't around them all the time. It's kind of like I knew they were there. And anyway, I want to say thank you to the Tognettis, and I know you can't be here. The horses, again, he was extremely competitive. It was something that brought us together as a family after my mom was an alcoholic. And at first he liked to just ride out, and we'd ride out on ranches. And then one day the mare that we'd been breeding came up empty, and she had a filly down here that was in the Futurity Open and making the finals. And that mare came up open. We were devastated, so I legged her up, and I entered him in a little jackpot kind of club show. I don't remember what it was. And he goes, why are you doing this? I just want to ride out. And when we ride out, he would sneak off and cut out a cow, a little bit, and that mare would give him a little dance, and shake her head, and he'd laugh, and he'd think it was fun. Well, I entered him. We hung around this show all day. I think there's a picture of me on there adjusting his stirrups. It was sunny at that point, but the day ended up being miserably cold and wet and damp. And we were there probably from 6 in the morning till 8 o'clock at night. And he's going, why do you want to do this? Hang around all day for 2.5 minutes. Wah, 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 all day. He was in the last class of the day, and that mare put it on him. And he is big man. He was between her ears. His heels were up in her flanks. And he was all over, off to the side, this side and that side. And I'm sitting in the corner crying because she just poured her heart out for him. And I couldn't say anything to help him except sit down. And he had the high score of the day. And we wham, bang, get out of there because it was raining. And we get down the road, and his favorite thing was to go to dinner after. And he just kept saying, I can't catch my breath, can't catch my breath. And I thought we were going to give him a heart attack because that year was an extremely stressful year. He was being audited by the IRS, and it was a bad year on top of that, and I remember he was so stressed. Anyway, after that, he was hooked. And then when you'd ask him, do you want to go cut or do you want to go right out? He'd go, I want to cut, I want to cut. And then when we work horses at home, I would say like, okay, Dad, quit. And he'd be like, one more turn, one more turn. And then I'd fight with him and say, Dad, it's not about the turn, it's about the stop. One more, one more. He never got enough. And then he got so competitive, his mare came up lame at one show, and so we doubled up on my horse, and I hadn't marked a 76 yet. I was close, but I hadn't marked it yet. He goes in there, and he marks a 76 on my horse. I'm like, son of a gun. He comes out of there, he goes, now you got to do the same thing. I did that day. But the funny thing is when we were in the secretary's office that morning, when we're entering, I said, good luck, and he said, good luck to you. You're going to need it because I'm going to kick your ass. So, I mean, that was the way he rolled. It was all in. Him and Mom she didn't get the farming that much. It was a pain in the butt to her the first half of her life until she finally was comfortable with him not being there. And, she just started doing more of her own thing, and it turned out pretty cool. But one thing that they were funny, like going down the road when we'd be traveling, is we called them the shrooms in the back seat. That would be Mom and Molly, and Dad and I were up in front, pilot and co-pilot. And shrooms didn't matter, okay? Nobody cares about shrooms. They got to pee, they got to eat, they got to drink. Who cares? Nobody cares. That was the way Dad rolled. It was, you stopped when he was ready to stop. But they would be going down the road, and it was the funniest thing, even when Molly and I are sitting in the back seat of the car, is they're going down the road, and Mom's like, oh, look at that over there. Isn't that cute? And oh, I wonder when they did that. Oh, and look, see how they did that. And look at that cloud. It looks like an elephant. I mean, all over the board. Dee-dee-dee-dee. And then it was like, oh my God, Dirk. Because he about hit a mailbox or something like that and swerving all over the place because he's farming when he's driving down the road. But it was really kind of funny. It reminded me of that Duck Dynasty clip of them, the couple driving down the road going, oh, looky over here. Look, remember when? They were a lot like that. It was a hoot. It was a lot of fun. Don't know what else I wanted to say. Oh, one of his things was that he beat into my head that I know he was changed when we came out here because he did things with equipment that he would have killed me for. And one of it was when I was learning to drive, you run this thing out of oil, water, or water or oil or fuel, you're walking. He said, know where your gauges run, hot, cold, and middle, under certain circumstances, watch your gauges and know what's normal for that truck. Well, we get out here, and it was always use more power than what you need. We get out here, and he's tearing stuff up, doing wheelies in the tractor. I mean, he had that thing standing on 2 wheels, on 1 wheel, with pulling a disc that was way too big for it, full throttle, gauges, tractor's overheating, and then he gets in his pickup, and we're driving, and he got his truck out of the shop, and we're getting ready to go back to California for something on a long drive. We're in Millsap. And I go, Dad. He goes, what? I said, you can't tell me it's just raining on my side of the truck. And I'm leaning over to look over at his temperature gauge, and she's heating up. And he goes, I'm not worried about it. I got to get home. Well, sure enough, we broke down in Sweetwater. But, So anyway, those were signs some of the signs that I knew that he was changing was between the softness and crying on that little statue, the way he started treating equipment and stuff. He got very careless. And I mean, he just really didn't care about tearing something up. I mean, he was almost trying to. It just like, and that was one thing I was jealous when I was putting this thing together, and I saw the horses that have passed. He's up there riding my horses, and he's doing like he always did. He's spurring them on by that cow, because he accelerated all the way to the top, and that's the way he would have wanted to go out. Thank you.
You just said it right there. Thank you, Miss Leslie. Well, I'm going to tell you about the Dirk that I know, and I haven't known him, but I don't know how many years it's been, but Brother Dirk is one of the classic characters of my life. And I've known him for several years. He served on the financial board of our church, and I've sat in meetings with him when I looked over. And one of the funny things that we used to do, I shared this the other day, was Dirk, near the end, not long ago, he would still come to the meetings, but he would fall asleep during the meetings. And so I always sat by him just to harass him a little bit, because somebody would say, well, I think there's 12 or 13 on the financial board, and he would be sitting there asleep. Now, this is recently. And so I'd sit by him, and when it was time to vote, somebody would say, I'll make a motion that we do this, and I would elbow him, he'd go, second, and go right back to sleep again. So that was kind of a private joke with the financial board. The Dirk that I know, a friend, one of the most authentic Christians I have ever met. In a way, without him even trying, he was a mentor to me. He taught me how to be cool in the fire, how to forgive people. I have never heard one accusatory word from him, not one. Of all the years that I've known Dirk, I've never heard him say one bad thing about anybody, anytime, anywhere. So what I like to do when a dear friend of mine passes away and goes to be with Jesus, I like to put a character from the scriptures into their life. I'm not going to read anything. I was going to read it to you, but I'm not going to today. I'm going to tell you about who I think Dirk is like in the scriptures. There was a man in Acts chapter 4, his name was Barnabas. His real name was Joseph. And Joseph was from Cyrene, which is an island in the Mediterranean Sea. He was Jewish, and he loved God. Well, one day Joseph became a Christian. You can read this if you're interested in Acts chapter 4. So there were only two churches, and I'm just going to take just a very few minutes here. But there were only two churches in the world at the time. The church with all of the authority was in Jerusalem. It had Simon Peter and James and John and all the big boys. But a little church 400 miles to the north was the only other church in existence, and it was called the church at Antioch. It is at Antioch where people were first called Christians, not Jerusalem. And a member of the Jerusalem church, this Joseph was. Joseph, they even changed his name to Barnabas, and Barnabas means a son of encouragement. And that's one of the things that Dirk always did with me and my family in this church. He always encouraged us. Even when he said nothing, he always had a smile on his face. Always. I've never seen him not smiling, unless he was asleep. But Barnabas starts hearing that non-Jews, people like us, Gentiles, that we are coming to Christ. And he gets all excited about it. And they send him, Barnabas, 400 miles to the north to check on this thing called Gentiles being saved, an unheard of situation. So without prejudice and with love in his heart, Barnabas goes up to this other church in Antioch and discovers that, yes, non-Jews are being saved and being brought into the kingdom of God. As a matter of fact, he even goes, this Barnabas in the Bible, in Acts chapter 14, even goes and gets a man named Paul to mentor. He mentors Paul. In other words, without Barnabas, there would have never been a Paul. He goes and finds Paul in a place called Tarsus, which is in Asia Minor in Europe. And he leads, and he starts talking to his name was Saul at the time. Saul turned into Paul. So Barnabas' real name was Joseph. He became a son of encouragement. And then the other one's name was Saul, and he became Paul, the great apostle of which you've all heard about. But my point is this, without Dirk in my life, I don't know that I would be the same person I am now. I certainly know that this church would not operate as it does now. He was kind. I just wrote a very few. I'm not going to preach anything today. Look, I hadn't even opened this yet. We're good. This is what I know about him. Barnabas, as Dirk, was courageous. He was a witness. He rejoiced a lot. And I'm taking this right out of what's going on when Barnabas goes up to Antioch and says, "What's going on here, guys?" This is his response if you'll just read the story. Same with Dirk in this church at Peaster. He had courage. He was a witness for Jesus. He rejoiced a lot. He encouraged them all. He was resolute in his ideas concerning Jesus. He was a visionary. He trusted people, and he was unselfish. Back in Acts chapter 4, we're told that he even sold a parcel of land and made some money. We're not told how much, but he said he sold a parcel of land and laid the money at the apostles' feet to spend any way they wanted to spend. What an incredible man. I will miss him very, very much. You know, I don't get close to a lot of people, but he was my friend, and I am honored to have known him. It's a pure joy to be considered Dirk's friend. I will always remember him fondly, and yes, there is a portion of me and a portion of this church that will always exist because there was a Dirk in front of it. My wife, Jody, come on up, Jody. My wife, Jody, has a very quick story that she told me this a couple of years ago. Now, she does not like crowds. That's why she doesn't even come into church on Sunday mornings. She's been our nursery director for like 85 years. And so she's very shy. So this is going to be hard for her, but she said she would do it. Because I said, it's either going to be me or you, but I want you to listen to this story. Here you go.
Okay, so this morning,
Should be.
this morning when I was trying to...
Wait a minute. Is this on? There.
Okay. This morning, I was asking the Lord to give me, I've got so much I want to say about Dirk, but Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 says, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience." And I think that was the Dirk I knew in a nutshell. He had all of those qualities. Nola went to be with the Lord in November of 2020. Am I correct? In January 2021, we lost a very dear friend to COVID. And we came for the service, and I was sitting up here in the balcony with some friends, and I saw Dirk come in by himself and sit up here over on this side. And I just felt so compelled. I nearly just climbed over chairs to get over there to sit with him. I knew he was still grieving. I could not, my heart would not let him sit by himself. So I thought, I'm just going to go over there. I want to be a comfort to him. We were grieving over our friend's death, and of course, Dirk knew him also, and sat up there, and of course, I took Dirk by the arm, and I leaned over on him, and he would just pat my hand, you know, and we got through the service. Well, right at the end of the service, our friend was a lover of the band Eagles, the Eagles band, and the last song they played was "Take It to the Limit" as they were taking him out, and I lost it. I lost it. I was so sad and so grieved, and Dirk put his arms around me and just held me, and I cried and I cried and I cried, and people started walking out, people started leaving, and I was still just crying and crying, getting mascara and makeup all over his jacket, and he never budged. He never said a word. He just held me close and let me cry, and I'm so grateful that that was my divine appointment with Dirk. You know, that was the time that Jesus let me just really see his heart and who he was. And I will never forget that day.
All right, thank you. True servant of God. True servant of God. I'd like to say this and we'll all go. If I had a prayer that I was going to say for Brother Dirk, would you just bow your heads for just a moment? It's one line. It's one line. But if you feel like it, under your breath or in your heart, silently, I would like for you to repeat it after it, because it's just one line. But this is my prayer for Dirk, who is now in heaven. And boy, are there some gardens in heaven, don't you know? But this is my prayer, and I would like for you to silently pray it with me. Father, into thy hands we commit his spirit. I'll say it one more time. Father, into thy hands we commit his spirit. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, God bless you for coming. I know it's been a busy day for you. Many of you have traveled 3.5 hours to get here. There's going to be do we have any final instructions for folks, Miss Molly? Good golly, Miss Molly. One final thing as we're leaving. I know this, so we're going to pull a little surprise on you. We're going to play a song in a minute as you're leaving. That was the song that inspired Dirk to ask Nola to marry him. It is deeply religious, deeply theological, deeply biblical. As a matter of fact, let's just show them what the song is. This is the song. You can stay here. Huh? No, sit, woman. We're going to play you the song that inspired. This is actually the song that was playing when Dirk asked Nola to marry him.
He rocks in the treetop all the day long, hopping and a bopping and a singing his song. All the little birds on Jaybird Street love to hear the robin go tweet, tweet, tweet. Rockin' Robin, tweet, tweet, rockin' Robin.
We're going to start dancing if you don't stop.
My papa was a man of few words. And honestly, at times it drove me nuts. I couldn't stand silence. And those of you that know me well already know that. But he was the kind of person that led and taught by his actions, not by what he said. And there's a quote that always, in my mind, embodied who he was and the example and the standard that he set for us. Even though he never said it, and it's a John Wayne quote from the Alamo. There's right and there's wrong. You got to do one or the other. You do one and you're living. You do the other and you may be walking around, but you're as dead as a coonskin cap. And in Papa's mind, that was it. That was all there was. And it didn't matter what we wanted to do or what your passion was. He didn't see a purpose in some clock in, clock out job you hated so that you could play on the weekends. Whatever it was you loved and had a passion for that the Lord put in your heart, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. Mach 10, all the way. And you were not allowed to give up. You could change plan of attack. You could change your program. You could tweak or just regroup. But give up was not in the vocabulary. That was it. Simple.
Do you have any announcements about dinner for the family or anything you'd like to?
I don't know anything.
You don't know anything? That's the first time Molly's ever admitted she didn't know something. Leslie, do we have any instructions for people? Well, then let's all stand. We're going to start a little bit of music. You're feel free to visit in here as long as you want to. And God bless you. And may the blessings of Jesus be upon this congregation and all Dirk's friends. Thank you for being here.